I got interested in Giacomo Beltrami was when I came back from...
Is that okay? Is it okay to have the lights off? Okay.
When I came back, we vacationed down here last August. When I came back to school, I just happened to be in American Indian Studies office and talking about the capstone that I wanted to do. Dr. Martin happened to be in there and said, well, you should do that on Beltrami, the guy that their county is named after. Then he went on to explain on how he was invited out to Bergamo back in 2000 in order to help them identify the artifacts. They really didn't know what they were. And he knew them, and the interesting thing about the artifacts, which we'll get to a little later, is that they're all quilled. They're very, very old. It's done with quilling. Okay, Beltrami, well, I like to call him, after doing the research, an accidental tourist here in Minnesota, because he didn't come here initially to the United States as an explorer. And he did not come here as an explorer initially. As you can see, in 1814, on the picture on the left, that is what Beltrami looked like. That's the real, a good likeness of what he was like. By 1828, as you can see in the center picture, the sketch, that showing him to be a marksman with both bow and arrow and with a rifle. And of course, that's kind of a romanticized, because he doesn't look anything like he did in 1814. And then by 1856, 1 year after he had passed away, he turns out to be like the really macho type of explorer. Yeah, and none of that's really true. In the year 2000, the museum in Bergamo held an exhibition, and that's the cover of the brochure, or one of the brochures. I see that you've got one like Dr. Martin has. Yep. And then there's another one that's more of just a catalog of what they had in inventory there. And that is a picture of what that museum looks like. To me, it looks more like a fort. It doesn't really look like a museum. And the artifacts are and have been housed there. And they have always on display. The flute that he brought back is considered the oldest flute in North America, and it also has the best pitch of any flute that they've ever heard, which Dr. Martin got to play while he was out there. All right, we'll start talking about how he ended up here. When he was born, his father decided that Beltrami should be a lawyer. He was the 15th of 16 children, and his father decided he should be a lawyer. Well, when Napoleon invaded northern Italy and it became part of France, those plans changed. So Napoleon joined the French army, and after a few years, he had become an inspector general. Then later on, he became a judge. He was appointed a judge in the northern part of France, or northern part of Italy. But then he came down with an illness. The lady on the right is the Countess d'Albany. And she was a very wealthy woman, and he rehabilitated with her, and through her, he got to meet her. She was not just wealthy, she was extremely powerful. She also, through her, he got to meet most of the really important people in Europe of the time. Then, at the same time, and unfortunately there are no sketches that I could find, portraits or anything, of Julia Spada de Medici. That was a woman that he fell in love with, and they had a platonic relationship. But the bad thing was, in 1820, she passed away. And he never got over that. Because if you ever read A Pilgrimage in America that he wrote in 1824, after his adventure up here in Minnesota, every chapter is a letter, and he addresses it to her directly. And always is writing to her, even though she has been passed away since 1820. He became a political refugee after the Napoleonic regime crumbled in 1821. He had the Austria-Hungary took part of northern Italy. The Papal States took the other part. He ended up being in the part that was in the Papal States. because he had collaborated with the Napoleonic government, the Papal States sent a warrant out for his arrest. They wanted to know what he did when he collaborated with Napoleon. So he decided to leave. All of the connections he had made while he was with the Albany and met all of these people, he was able to get out of Italy. He traveled for a year in Europe. He went to France, he went to Germany. He ended up in England. And then on October 22nd, 1822, he was in Liverpool, and there was a ship called the Reaper that was heading to Philadelphia. So he decided, maybe I'll just go to the United States. This is the way he did things after he got out of Italy. He just would, at the drop of a hat, he would just decide what he wanted to do. He had absolutely no agenda. By the time he gets to the United States and gets into Philadelphia, that's December 30th, 1822, he decides, well, maybe I'll just go down to Washington, D.C. and visit President Monroe, which he did. He just walked into the White House and visited Monroe a little bit. He was totally unimpressed. He didn't like Washington. He thought it was not a royal city like they were in Europe. He didn't like the White House because it didn't look like a castle. And he thought Monroe was just too common. So then he went on to Pittsburgh and decided, maybe I'll just go west. Here is where he met,
What's that?
it's all right. No, go ahead. Yeah, just leave it there. He finds his way to Fort St. Anthony. Along the way, when he gets to Pittsburgh, he runs into Lawrence Talavero. Talavero was of Italian descent, and he was the new appointed Indian agent to come out here to Fort St. Anthony, which is now Fort Snelling, in order to try to find a solution and work with the Ojibwa Indians and Sioux Indians to stop their conflict. He was the Indian agent for them. Beltrami met him and felt comfortable because Talafero's family had been in the country for about 90 years, and they were also of Italian descent. Talavero could speak Italian, so he felt pretty comfortable with them. And after he met him, he decided to go to Fort St. Anthony, and then he decided, maybe I'll start studying or learn about Indians. He had never seen an Indian before in his life. He didn't have a clue. He just did, that wasn't his intent when he came to the United States. He ends up at Fort St. Anthony. After he arrives at Fort St. Anthony, the gentleman on the left is a portrait of Talavero. And on the right, there are reenactors, because I couldn't find actual portraits of Josiah Snelling or Abigail Snelling. Beltrami became instant friends with Talavero, but he also became instant friends with Snelling and his wife. They really liked the guy. They entertained him constantly for the 2 months he was there. The first 2 months he started in at Fort St. Anthony. The time he spent there, he did a lot of collecting of artifacts. They were mostly Siouan ones at that time, and because the Sioux Indians were right up around Fort St. Anthony most of the time. And while he was there, there we are. This is a replica of a bear claw necklace because there was a Sioux chief that came in to Fort St. Anthony, and Beltrami wanted that necklace. Well, he tried and bartered and asked, and whatever he could give for it, that he would not give it up. So he went and asked Abigail Snelling if she would have persuasive influence in order to help him attain this. So she explained to him that that was probably a medallion or something that was really important to him, showing his prowess, maybe dealing with his medicine, whatever. But she would try. So she did her best. She really talked to the chief, and he said no. Said, well, finally he said, under one condition I will do this. You cut off all your hair, and you braid it for me into a necklace. You can have mine and I can have yours. Well, Beltrami and her both laughed, and they said, no, that's not going to happen. They just laughed at how he had outbidded them, so there was no way that was going to happen. So this is the route that he actually took. If you go out to the display, it's color-coded. This one isn't, because his journey in Minnesota and actually just before on his way to Fort St. Anthony, there are 4 phases to it. First phase, from going to the bottom to the, right up to the middle there, to Fort St. Anthony, that's just when he really learned and met Talavera and decided he was going to become a geographer and an ethnologist, which he wasn't. He was actually a lawyer, and he was a political refugee here in the United States. Then on June 23rd, 1823, Major Stephen Long, and along with Keating, came here to with a survey party ordered by the War Department from Secretary Calhoun at the time, and their mission was to find the source of the St. Peters River, which is the Minnesota River today, and then to go on to the northern boundary to fully establish the border between the United States and Canada, over to the Lake of the Woods and on down through Rainy Lake. Because there had been a problem up at Pembina, okay. With a Scottish settlement that had settled there, and they were below the 50th parallel. So we needed to establish what our borders were with the United States and Great Britain at that time, which is now Canada. So they left. The first phase of the journey goes from here up to here, that phase. He's with the Long expedition. Long did not want him to go because he didn't like Beltrami at all. They didn't get along. But with the friendship that Beltrami had established with Colonel Snelling, Snelling ordered Long to take him along. When I got up to India,
Pembina.
then, okay, I'll get it right sometime. Okay, that's when he decided to leave the expedition because he didn't want to go on to the Lake of the Woods. He actually decided at that time he wanted to learn more about the Indians in the area. He also wanted to find the source of the Mississippi River. So he set out on his own. He had convinced 2 Voice Rural Indians to accompany him. Now, the first question I got from some of my professors was, how would he communicate with them because he didn't speak any of the native tongues? Well, Voice Rural generally can speak French at that time. Beltrami could speak French as well because he worked in the Napoleonic government for many, many years. So he had to be bilingual, at least bilingual that way. So that's how he did that. They set out, they put all the artifacts that he had collected up to this time into a dog cart. They had 2 dogs. They used them to pull them over land. After 3 days, they made it to the Thief River. When they got to the Thief River, the two dogs were exhausted from everything that he had collected, pulling the cart along. And then the 2 Voice Rural Indians that were with him said, we're going to leave you here, and there'll be 2 more showing up because there's a party of Sioux Indians following us, and we're fearful for our lives. Because this time, the war between the Sioux and the Ojibwa was going at a rather fever pitch in this area. From 1820 to 1827, there was a lot of confrontation between the 2 tribes up there. So, in the morning, 2 showed up, and they had a canoe. So they loaded everything into the canoe. They went down to where the Thief River meets the Red Lake River. There, these 2 told him, we're going to leave you here because we're fearful for our lives, because there is a party of Sioux that are following us. Beltrami was left all by himself at this time. In the next 4 days, he traveled alone. He could not make the canoe work. He could not paddle it. So what he had to do, he tied a rope around his waist, and he tied a rope to the bow of the canoe, and he walked down the middle of the river. He had to drag everything for 4 days. It was really tough. He got caught in one really bad thunderstorm, and he had to just take time to dry out. So after 4 days, he ran across an Ojibwa village, and he convinced an older gentleman in the village to help him find Red Lake, because he knew he was close, but he just really didn't know how to get there. It was only 1 day away, and he got to Red Lake. When he got to the entrance of Red Lake, he turned around and he looked and he said, I have been in the wilderness for the last, well, actually at this point, the last 9 days. And now I understand why the Native Americans feel more superior to the cultivated nations, and they are happier. and before I re-enter civilization. And myself, when I read that statement, I kind of looked at him as saying he understood that there was another type of civilization that existed besides European civilization. Because he was recognizing that these people had something, and they were happy, and they had their lifestyle, and the Europeans had their end, and he was going back into the European style type of life. Then while he was in and around Red Lake, he went all around these lakes. And eventually he got excited because he thought he had found the source of the Mississippi River. And that's what he called it. It's Lake Julia. It's just north of here. And that's how it got its name. But that wasn't the source of the Mississippi at all. He was totally mistaken on that. Then on for the next probably 3 weeks, he was all in and around this area, Lake Traverse, which is Lake Bemidji today, and all around these little lakes. And he named 8 lakes after 8 members of his family, but it's not listed on who they were named after or where they were, which lakes were named. But then he decided it was time to start home. He was in a village that's along Lake Traverse, and there was a chief called Cloudy Weather. And he had lost a son-in-law in a skirmish with the Sioux Indians. And he was contemplating making a war party to go back and get revenge with the Sioux. Where he discovered that Beltrami was a friend of Lawrence Talaferro. So he came to Beltrami and he asked him what he should do. And Beltrami said, well, maybe you should accompany me back to Fort St. Anthony and talk to Talaferro, which I think it was a twofold thing. I think he was utilizing this in order to have somebody to guide him back to Fort St. Anthony because he really didn't know how to get there. And he was afraid of getting lost again. And throughout this whole time, when he was going, well, he makes it back, and he gets a big surprise when he gets back to Fort St. Anthony because the party of Sioux Indians that had been following him ever since he had left the long expedition followed him clear to Fort St. Anthony. And he said, you know, that thing you've got there that's red, which is a red umbrella. He used a red umbrella the whole time, which is very, very large, to cover the artifacts to keep sunlight off of them and to keep rain off of them. And that was the start of how he really did a really good job of preserving these things. Then he told him, he said, well, we thought that you were actually signaling for reinforcements. And we didn't know what that meant. And because we thought you were signaling for reinforcements, that's why we didn't attack you. If we would have known that that was just something to keep your artifacts and sunlight on, we would have killed you. So he was extremely lucky in that sense. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about the artifacts. This is a picture of actually it's a Sioux military coat, and I want you to take note of the quill work. Those are done with quills, and unfortunately I forgot to bring the book that goes with the exhibit, which I'll be mailing up here, that explains what quill work is and how quill work is done. It's a pretty intricate thing because you take the porcupine quills and that's how you make it. And what's a thing that was amazing to me when I was reading about quilling is that one porcupine, you can get 30,000 quills off of that, which just sounds phenomenal. And there's 2 different styles of Ojibwa war clubs that he collected. And birch bark baskets, which are pretty common. I'm sure all of you have seen them. And they used quills to tie them together. And it's very intricate work. That is a comparison. There's a difference between Ojibwa quill work versus Siouan quill work. This is off of the one on the left is off of a teepee cover, or a Sioux teepee. And you see it's more in straight lines. The one on the left is a pouch, and it's actually a hair pin pouch. And the Ojibwa do things more in circular fashion as well. It's actually more intricate. And he also got 2 birch bark scrolls, which raises a real big curiosity with me, and also Dr. Martin has seen these. And Birch bark scrolls, Ojibwe people always would record historical events on them, or they would record medicine events on them, or medicine ceremonies on them, and how they were to be done. That way they wouldn't forget anything. And I would just curious how he attained these. I have not been able to find that. It's not something I feel that would have been bartered away. So I really don't know how he got those. Then I talked about him and Claudia Rather returning to Fort St. Anthony. And then eventually Beltrami returned to Italy, and he passed away in 1855. Then in 1866, Alfred J. Hill, who was a former director of the Minnesota Historical Society, read about his passing in a German archaeological magazine. And at that point in time, he thought, you know, we've always wanted to do something for the explorers of the Northwest, but we never have. Well, maybe we should do something for him, but they didn't really know too much about him. So he wanted more information, so he sent a letter off to the mayor of Bergamo. The mayor of Bergamo sent back a 34-page pamphlet about Beltrami. He sent back a portrait of Beltrami that had been painted, and that was about all the information there was. The house on the left is the Beltrami House. Some of his descendants still live in that home, so it's still in the Beltrami family. And then Governor Henry H. Sibley created Beltrami County, and it's a little bit bigger than it is today. But in the statement, when he created Beltrami County, he said that Beltrami would be a wondrous spectator in the land that he wandered, taking hospitality from the Indians that he met along the way in their lodges. And he only knew this as a prairie where the herds of buffalo and the herds of elk roamed. The only one thing that he didn't really realize, that there already existed a complex Native American civilization there that Beltrami had discovered. And that civilization had existed a long time before Giacomo Beltrami ever entered Minnesota. And that's all I have. Anybody have any questions?
Turn on the lights.
Yes.
I have a question. Financially, did he have independent wealth when he left to kind of ramble around?
No. What he did was, when he got into Philadelphia, he wrote a book about his journeys in Europe alone, and his intent was to sell them along the way in order to make money. Yeah, he didn't have independent wealth at all, and he kind of lived off the wealth of Albany when he was in Florence, when he was rehabilitating from being ill, and then that's how he did. And actually, when he got to New Orleans then, in late 1823, he wrote another book about, which is part 2 of the pilgrimage in America. And he spent the next 4 years before he headed back to France, because he couldn't go back to Italy yet because that particular pope was still alive, defending what he wrote. Because a lot of people didn't quite believe what happened to him along the way. Because one thing that he does write about, and it's the only thing I can find about writing about it, was that he, when he was with the second group of guides that were leaving out there, he bragged about how well he shot the game. He could do it with one shot. And his guides gave him a name called Gitche Ogama, which he said meant great warrior. Well, I asked my Ojibwe teacher at University of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and it actually means just great chief, not really warrior. So, and it's great is only implied. It's not really forceful. Yes?
Yes. Could you talk about how he came to receive the title Count Beltrami? Maybe you did, maybe I missed it, but
because I can't find anywhere he says that he's a count, because he didn't come from a really wealthy family, and he was never really a count. I don't know, he might have given himself that title when he got here, but it's something I know, it crops up and just all of a sudden it shows up. But when he was in Europe, he wasn't a count.
Does anybody else refer to him as a count except for the locals around here? Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I know. I hear that when I get out here, but when we are like away from here, and when you study in a player, and you never see the word count.
Yeah, I think to me it seems it's his relationship with the Countess Julia that people are confusing, because he always addresses her as Countess all the time.
That's right, and she was a countess, and so was the both women that he really was around in Italy while he was working for the French government were countesses, and the one was an extremely wealthy one and powerful one. Yes?
I have another question. You mentioned that these 6 lakes were named after his family members. I checked out the internet after I got the article in the paper, and it said that he had named them after Julia's children.
Oh, really? Okay. So I just know what I ran across in my research
But
was
you
it
get
just...
so many different people will write different things, and it doesn't mean one's correct and one's incorrect.
That's correct. And
Is there a possibility, it said that they had a platonic relationship, but is there a possibility that they could have had children?
It's possible. They just say platonic. You know, nobody was there. You know, none of us were there in 1823 to know, or 1820s. So that's true. And it's not uncommon to run across that in history, where one person will say, well, he named it after 8 family members. Well, maybe those family members, and that's kind of general speak, maybe that was her children, maybe it was his siblings. I don't know. Yes?
At that time, was Minnesota that same shape that it is now? Do you know? Was Minnesota that same shape then as it is now? Like on the map there?
Is it the same shape? Is Minnesota the same shape as it then as it is now?
Yeah,
That
Minnesota, yeah, that's a map from 1874. Yeah, but the county has changed.
But in 1823, though, Minnesota did not look like that.
No, it was just a territory. Yeah.
Did it even have a territory status? It was not that long that Lewis and Clark made their expedition. But I'm curious as to why the historians didn't, did Beltrami have any maps of the area? Because I think that probably coming upstream all the way from Red Lake and then going into a downstream situation, he did not mistake the source of Mississippi.
Yeah, you go back several, just go to this part. Yeah, that's right, keep going back. Yeah. This is a sketch map that he made, and it's in your book. Yeah. And he located a lot of the items that he took. As far as finding Red Lake, he himself, he didn't have any maps with him. He was relying on people to help him get there.
In theory, he would have had Pike's map, Lieutenant Pike's map, and maybe David Thompson. Did he have a map?
Yeah. He didn't have any maps. No, he just sat out on his own. He went out totally. That's why Keating on the trip told him, "Good luck if you're leaving us. The way you're leaving us, because you have no idea where you're going." Yeah.
Yeah, just one point of clarification. Those of us that live in this area and love Bemidji, we have this idea, that maybe more than an idea, this concept, maybe it's a reality, that Lake Julie is the northernmost source of the Mississippi. For this reason, because at that time, when Beltrami probably stood on Buena Vista and looked down at Lake Julia, there was probably some seepage or river or waterway that led into a little lake called Summit Lake, and then that lake led into Little Turtle, and then of course from there you can make it to the Mississippi. But because it's on the Continental Divide, the water from Julia does flow to the Hudson Bay, and conceivably at that time it could have flowed south.
Right. It could have easily been like a northern fork or an eastern fork, because the Chippewa River's that way over in Wisconsin. It starts with an eastern and a western fork. And So it's really possible, but history books don't give him the credit for it.
Yeah, they don't. I think they're written by Republicans, but maybe I could be wrong.
Yep.
The artifacts, the Native American artifacts, are they in a museum in Italy?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Martin went over there in the year 2000. They had contacted him, yeah, he's got the same book. And he has another catalog that everything's in black and white. Right.
Have they ever opened the scrolls and looked to see what?
No. They did in Italy, and he wouldn't open them because, one, they were so old, he was afraid they would fall apart. Secondly, he didn't feel right about doing it. So,
What's that? We didn't hear.
okay. Yeah, she asked if the scrolls had ever been opened, and no, they haven't. At least not, as far as I know, not since the year 2000 anyway. Because when Dr. Martin went out there, he looked at them, but he did not open them. He was afraid they would maybe fall apart. Secondly, he did not feel right about doing it either. So he is an Ojibwe Indian from Osceola. So, yes.
Did Count Beltrami keep a diary, like when you shared so many of these dates and everything? He must have kept some kind of diary.
Yes, he did, and he wrote those, all got compiled into the pilgrimage in America. Yeah.
How many days was he in the area from the time he arrived in Red Lake to the time he left Bemidji for St. Paul?
He was here about 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything in the museum in Bergamo that, what you mentioned that, you know, they didn't know what they were looking at either and needed your boss to go over there and identify things. Are there other books or texts or records or anything else that could shed more light on Beltrami's life that hasn't been translated or hasn't been looked at in a long time?
If they are, they're over there.
It's there, yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem, it's over there. Even the decree making not the state of Minnesota, but the Beltrami County is over there. Because Henry Sibley sent it over there, but he didn't make a copy.
Yeah.
So the decree to declare the county is in Italy.
Huh.
Yeah.
When I was in grade school, and this was like in the mid-40s, I remember in a history book, there was a picture of Count Beltrami. Because I was born in Beltrami County, is probably why I remembered it, but it showed him with the red umbrella, sleeping under it. Well, it must have been when he came after fighting the elements with the canoe he didn't know how to row, paddle. And he was sleeping and he was tired and he covered up to get out of the sun and of course to cover up his artifacts. And the Indian people, you know, the men had come upon him and they were frightened because they saw the red umbrella and didn't quite know what it meant. And so he mentioned that either they had thought he was kind of crazy or they kept their distance and stayed away from him. And so that apparently had to do with what you covered earlier. But I went on internet, couldn't find that little story.
Yeah, you have to find it in a book called The Man with the Red Umbrella by, his last name's Nietzsche. I've got it out there in my sources consulted. The book was written in 1974 and he was a professor at Tulane University at the time. And he just happened to be looking at a map of Minnesota and discovered that there is an Italian name that one of the counties is named after. So he decided to research it. And he went over to Bergamo. He did a lot of stuff with what he could find in archives about him. And he did get to see some of the artifacts, but at that time, in 1974, they still had them in storage. And they did a really good job at storing them because they look brand new. There is no fading on any of the quills. Nothing is faded. Dr. Martin was just totally amazed when he saw them, that they did not look like they should be 150 years old or older. And there was a flute that is there that is considered the oldest flute in North America that he had collected. And they consider it the one that has the best tone of any flute that they've ever heard. There's a website for it. It's called the Beltrami Flutes. And it talks about the flute extensively, and it's always on display in Bergamo. And Dr. Martin actually got to play it. And it was quite fun. Yeah.
If you go to the museum today, are quite a few of the artifacts out on display now, or are they still in storage, or?
Most of them are in display in Bergamo, but some of them are in display in other towns up there now. They're kind of spread out a little bit now. They're not all in one place.
How about the red umbrella? Is it there?
Yes, it is. They display it all the time. Also, they display his powder horn. Yeah.
How old was Count Julia when she died?
She was in her 30s. Because by the time he came here, he was 43. She was in her later 30s when she passed away. And I don't know what she died of because I've never been able to find that either. Yeah.
When did they start to put the items on display?
Do I?
When did they start to put the items on display in the museum?
As far as I know, it was the year 2000.
How come it took them so long?
Yeah, because they had they stayed the history of the artifacts where he had them in New Orleans, and then in 1824 he sent them to France. And then he caught up with them in France in 1828, and then in 1838 he was able to move back into Italy and not have to worry about being arrested. And he brought all the artifacts with him, but they just kept them in the home. He didn't donate them because his family donated them to the museum in Bergamo in 1856, a year after his death, because they didn't know what they were, they didn't know anything about them, and they just didn't want them around. So that's why they just put them in storage. And that's when they contacted Dr. Martin because they didn't know what these things were. And he doesn't really know how they got his name, but at the time he was the director of Indian Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. So he went over and he identified them, and then they wanted him to write them out in Ojibwa. So they'd have it in Italian, but they didn't always have it in their native tongue. Yes?
Do they know what he died from?
No, he just died, I guess, of natural causes. He had been ill from the time he came back from France, but from France, but he just slowly just passed away. Yeah.
Did you find any information about the names of the natives who showed him from Red Lake to Lake Julia, or anything about how he happened to get there?
No. And that's one thing that's lacking in the research, and it's really hard to find, because I had talked to Dr. Brenda Child over at the University of Minnesota. She's also the preservation officer up here at Red Lake Reservation. And I talked to her over there about that. She said, there probably isn't maybe any local stories, but maybe somebody after this presentation will know. Because I'd like to know, I'd like to hear that side of it too. Because at least what they thought of him, and it also can concur because if you compare the book about Long's expedition versus Beltrami's diary at that time, there are things that don't match up. And that's why it's kind of hard to just take his word, what he wrote for the whole time until I got back to Fort St. Anthony as to what happened. But it's like she said, for the most part in the history up in that area, he's kind of insignificant and things just kind of get lost.
How long did he camp out at Lake Julia? Do you know? He stayed there for a while, but how long was it? Do you have any idea how long it was?
No, I don't. Yeah.
In your research, the recounters often tell about the conflict between Major Long and Beltrami, and when I read both of their texts, neither of them seem to let on about it. I wonder if your research came on anything more when they go to he writes it at Pembina, so I'm always saying Pembina. There was some sort of conflict in Pembina and they split up. Do you know anything more about that?
The simple fact was Beltrami wanted to move southeast. He didn't want to go straight on across. Their assigned mission was to keep going through Lake of the Woods and stuff. There was conflict there, and there was conflict all the way along. And from the time that Long arrived at Fort St. Anthony, there was conflict all the time, and it took Snelling to allow him to go on. He had to intervene. So there's a journal article from 1823 in the Minnesota Historical Bulletin.
Okay.
By a guy named Theodore Christensen. He's from up around here, and I can't remember exactly where he talks a little bit more about the conflicts.
Okay.
And I have to go back to look at his footnotes to where he really found them, but he does document that a little bit more.
Right, right.
That they did not get along.
That's in the Minnesota Historical Society?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's from 1823. Well, if you go out there and you check my sources cited,
Yeah.
you'll be able to find it.
That's,
Okay?
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.